All right. Good afternoon once again, everybody. I'm Michael Chesney. I'm the Director of Communications for the Division of Small Business. We really appreciate everybody being here today. Looks like at this point, we have, more than 150 people who have joined, which is just wonderful. We're really glad to have everyone here. Hopefully can learn a lot about what you need to do to put together a killer application for a Division of Small Business EDGE grant. So what I'm going to ask everyone to do is not in the chat, but in the Q&A to put your questions as we go in there. Our director, Jordan Schulteis, is going to go through a presentation, and during the presentation, if you have questions, like I said, put them into the Q&A, and after she's done, we'll go back into the Q&A and go through questions and try and get you as many answers and as much helpful information as we can, again, to help you make sure that you've got a really great application. Again, applications are due for this round of EDGE grants on April 30th. By the end of the day. So with that, we'll turn it over to Jordan to take us along.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're really happy to have you with us and to be talking about EDGE grants and how to put your best foot forward with applications. I'm going to run through, we have just a quick slide deck to tell you what a great application looks like. We're going to hear from Kevin Schatz of Volunteer Brewing. He is a past EDGE winner for us. So he's going to kind of share a little insight on what his experience was like. And then we're also going to open it up for Q&A, like Michael said. Just a quick introduction to who we have on the call here. Michael, of course, introduced himself when he opened it up. We also have Regina Mitchell. She's the Deputy Division Director for the Division of Small Business. And we also have Laura Whistler and David Nathy. They are regional business managers for us, and they are your frontline folks for any and all questions when it comes to the EDGE grants. So you'll hear from them a little bit later as we get into the Q&A. For now, let's go ahead and dive in. So we always like to start with a positive, and to us, the favorite part of any of the rounds that we run is always the end when we get to the winners. It is just such an exciting time. Everybody has put in so much hard work. And it's really exciting to hear the business plans that are out and about. It's very inspiring to hear about what's going on in our community. So we always like to make it a big deal for the winners. We hold an awards ceremony. The governor has been there for both so far, both of our rounds that we've completed. And it's just a really nice way to highlight your achievements and to really celebrate for the day. So what are the EDGE grants? EDGE grants are separated into two categories. We have a STEM category and an entrepreneur category. The STEM category, we have 5 awards at up to $100,000 each. We typically get about 40 applications per round in that category. Those are typically your research-oriented type firms. Those are things really deeply rooted in your science field, in your STEM fields. The entrepreneur is a little wider, a little broadly defined. It really can be anything. We've had winners that have ranged the full gamut. So we typically have gotten somewhere in the neighborhood of 80 applications in previous rounds, and this is a change for this round. The award amounts are up to $25,000. There will be 10 awards in that category, where historically we've only had 5. So that was based on feedback we got from small business surveys, hearing that people wanted more awards and more opportunity, and they were willing to take lower amounts as a trade-off for that. So that was direct feedback there. If you're unsure about which one of those categories you fit in, I would really encourage you to reach out to the regional business manager for your area and kind of talk through your business with them specifically. And they've seen a complete 2 rounds at this point of applications, and they have a really good handle on what business fits into what category. If there's any kind of discrepancy or any kind of gray area there, they can help make sure you're getting into the category where you're going to be the most competitive. Don't make the mistake of looking at the STEM category for $100,000 and just automatically going all in on that, swinging for the fences, kind of, if you will. That's great if you qualify in the STEM category and you can be really competitive, but we don't want to see you put in for STEM and then you just don't get a fair shake compared to the business types that are in there. So who's eligible for the EDGE grants? Any business that's been in business for 5 years or less. Another important note for this round, if you were eligible in 2020, you will be eligible in 2021. So even if your business is now 6 years old, if you were eligible last time, you are now eligible again. And the reason we did that is some of you might recall, we started round 3 last year. We actually got all the way through the application phase. We had them in-house. We were so excited, ready to go. And then of course, March 2020 hit, the world flipped on its head and we weren't able to move any further because we had to pivot to do some other things. So we're so excited to be back to this and realize that, people that were eligible last year might have aged out over the time that we had to stop and pivot. So we will be considering those during this round. I will say, if you're at the top end of that eligibility, make sure that you get your application in for this round and don't wait, because we can't guarantee that you're going to be eligible for any future rounds that we may run. You have to have 10 or less full-time employees. Of course, the first question we always get when we define full-time employees is, well, what about my part-time folks? So 2 part-time employees is going to be the same as 1 full-time for the purposes of this program. Also, for the purposes of this program, specifically your contractors or those working less than 10 hours a week, kind of seasonal type folks will not count. Your business needs to be majority located here in Delaware. That's something that's been a little bit more interesting this round than it might have been in previous rounds. It's always been pretty cut and dry. You're either physically located here majority or you're not. And for most of our smaller businesses in 5 years or less, it's usually pretty straightforward. But with this year, we've had the question come up several times already. What happens if my employees are all working remotely? And now, because they might live in Pennsylvania, I don't really qualify as majority located. We're going to evaluate that on a case-by-case basis if you think that there's something there that now takes you out of being majority located in Delaware. But just as kind of your guiding principle, if you still have a physical space in Delaware and that is your primary majority space, but your employees are working remote and you intend to return to the physical space at some point, that would still classify you as majority located. But if that still doesn't kind of cover your situation, feel free to reach out and talk through it with us and we can let you know there how that goes. The next qualification point, net assets less than $500,000. That's why we ask for financial statements with your application. And we'll get into that a little bit deeper later on, but that's kind of the purpose there, making sure you have less than $500,000. And again, for most of our businesses less than 5 years, that's not typically an issue that they come across, but just putting that out there as a classifier. And you can have not previously received a strategic fund grant. That includes the bridge grants under the Delaware Technical Innovation Program. If you are unsure about whether or not you got a strategic fund grant, the answer to that question is probably no. That process involves a public meeting where you would appear in front of a council, and I'm going to guess that most folks would remember that pretty vividly. So if you don't think you've gone through that process, then that's where you fall on that spectrum. So diving down into the application, when you go to our website, delbiz.com/edge, you're going to find the application file there. And when you open it up, it's going to look pretty straightforward. It's not very long. It's going to ask you for some very basic demographic data. We want to know the name of your business, EIN number, just some basic things like that. The real meat of this comes at the end of that application. We are going to ask you to submit a proposal to us. And we left it very open-ended, and that was very intentional. We give you a list of some topics that we need you to hit. And beyond that, we're asking you to tell us about your business and how it fits into those things. As far as formatting for that goes, make sure it's Times New Roman, 12 font, double spaced, pretty standard. I had somebody ask me in a previous presentation, what about my margins? To that, I would say I would leave them at your standard size, but I guess as long as they're printed onto the page and it's legible, we won't pick hairs there. Maximum of 20 pages. And I cannot stress this enough, so I will say it one more time. Make sure you do not send us more than 20 pages total. We get a pretty high volume of these applications in, and it takes a pretty good amount of time to read them. Your application will be read by a live human being. We do not put them into any kind of, AI type situations. So our team is reading all of these applications, and it's a pretty condensed time frame to get it done. And what we've learned from our first 2 rounds is that you can really get this done in 20 pages. That's kind of the sweet spot between making sure you're including enough detail versus just absolute information overload. So 20 pages. Make sure that you do not send us 21. If you send us more than 20 and the most brilliant part of your proposal is on page 21, we will never know how brilliant you are. So please make sure you edit yourself down, make sure it's into the 20 pages. We do enforce that very, very strictly just to keep everything moving along. And when you have your full application package done, it has to be submitted electronically. And you can send that to the email address there, edgegrants@delaware.gov, and that is also on their website and on the application. Probably the biggest point I can make beyond the 20-page limit is to make sure you're following the rubric. This is also included in our application PDF. So when you download it from the website, it will be the final pages here. Make sure you're using the rubric for the category in which you're applying. We have both the STEM and the entrepreneur rubrics here. And really, this is your cheat sheet. This is how you can look at this and say, well, gee, what's the review team looking for? This is the answer right here. This is the exact rubric that the review team is going to go through your application with or through your proposal. And this is how they determine the points that are assigned to you. So if you can read through this and understand what would put me into the top tier, then really that's the best way to maximize your chance at getting an EDGE grant. The other note that we'll make here is that you can see there's a range on all of these boxes. So that in return on investment, we're looking here at the STEM rubric. The box all the way to the right is 35 to 40 points. And there's 5 different bullet points there about what makes this a really great application. This is where you need to really don't just do the bare minimum. You need to realize that that is a pretty big spread between 35 and 40. So you might hit these bullet points, make sure you're really reading through it and thoroughly answering the question, because that could be the difference between 35 and that could be the difference between 40. And 5 points can easily determine who gets into the finals and who doesn't. So use this as your guide. It will really help you strengthen your presentation a lot. So STEM rubric here, entrepreneur rubric is right behind it. Cheat sheet for what the review team is looking for. When you get through the rubric, to really look at your proposal and say, does this make sense? Here's what we have found from the ones that we've gotten that have just really made a lot of sense to us, really hit all the points. You can kind of break it down into 3 little sections. Tell us where your business is at. Tell us what your market looks like. Who are your competitors? What are you able to do right now? What are your core offerings? Just where are you at right now? Tell us what you need. What would you do if we do give you the grant? What would you use it for? Is it that your capacity is limited and now you need to increase, so you would buy a specific piece of machinery? Tell us that. Do you need help with a marketing plan? Do you need to be able to reach, the full potential of the customers that are out there for you? Tell us that. And be specific about what you would need with that. What if you were to get everything you've listed as what you need? Tell us where you would go. So if you get that critical piece of machinery, what would that look like for your business? What would your return on investment be? What would be the return on investment for the state? What would your community impact be? All of those things. And again, the rubric can help guide you specifically to each of the finer details in each of those 3 areas, but make sure that cohesively your proposal is making sense. We need to know where you're at, what you need, and where that would take you is a really easy way to sum that up. Couple small areas to focus on, a couple of the finer details getting down into this. When you're looking at sizing your market, make sure that you're using data to back all of these things up. And that's another great point to make about, the applications that have been successful. You need to define everything and you need to be able to use data to back it up. You need to define your competition, and don't fall into the trap of thinking, oh, I'm the only game in town. I don't have any competition. Let me give you an example. Let's say that you own the only floral shop in Laurel, Delaware. Okay, you don't have any direct competition because there are no other florists in town. Think about what would happen in the absence of competition. Maybe people now want to purchase chocolates instead of flowers. So you need to recognize that your competition might be a little broader than just another floral shop in your direct geographic area. The other thing to be really honest about is challenges. If we get a proposal that says, I don't have any challenges in my business, that doesn't come across necessarily as you have a really great handle on your business and all is well. It just comes across as you're really blind to the obstacles that could potentially be in front of you. And that's never a good place to be. It's okay to have challenges, assess them, and tell us about them. Moving on to the financial piece, and I briefly mentioned this earlier, make sure that you're including both an income statement and a balance sheet when we ask for the financial statements on the application. It is so frustrating to get applications in and they only have an income statement. We need the balance sheet to assess whether or not you're eligible for the program. And because of the volume we get here, we unfortunately just can't go back and forth with everybody. So if you send us an application and there's no balance sheet, we won't even read it. It will stop right there. It's marked incomplete. And it's really heartbreaking to see all the time and effort you've put into this, and you send us your neatly packaged 20 pages and then we can't even do anything with it. So please, please, please make sure you're sending both an income statement and a balance sheet. If you are confused about what that means exactly, please reach out to somebody. There are a lot of resource partners that we connect with, that we can connect you with, and we can help get your application to a point where everything is complete. So make sure your financial data is there. Another great point we see is with our applications that are really successful, they incorporate the financial data into their proposal. So it's not just that they've attached the income statement and the balance sheet because they're required to, and then that's it. That's all we hear about it. They're also using that and being very specific to weave it into where they are exactly. So they're able to say, here's where I'm at. I own X, Y, and Z machinery. That's on the balance sheet. We can see that. Or maybe it's a matter of talking about projections and saying, here's where I'm at with my revenue. And I think if I got this piece of machinery, I can increase it by X percentage. And then they're using that to segue into their projections. Make sure you're coming back to that. This is just a quick snapshot of what a balance sheet versus an income statement is for our folks that maybe aren't as familiar with the accounting side of things. I'm not going to get too far down into this here, except to say, if you're still confused and you're not sure where to go, reach out and get somebody to help you. We can get you connected. All right, so I'm going to pause here and turn this over to Kevin Schatz. Kevin is from Volunteer Brewing Company. He's a round 2 Edge winner for us. So Kevin, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Great, thanks, Jordan. And thanks for the invite. I think what I'm going to say is a lot of what you just said, Jordan. So I think some of my notes here perfectly match with what our approach was. So we participated in this twice. So we went through the first round and we actually got to the finalists presented and just missed out. So I think we probably missed out by about 5 points, like you said. So as frustrating and as difficult as that was, it really gave us a chance to sharpen our pencils, go back, work with the team and figure out, how could we get those few remaining points. And so just a little bit of background about Volunteer. So we're located in Middletown, Delaware. I think on the previous picture, if you could just jump back to that, maybe just to give you a sense of scale. So that blue building is really originally where we started and where we operate now. So that's a 500 square foot converted garage that we opened up with use of the adjacent yard. And then about 2.5 years ago, we had the opportunity to purchase that house just to the right and to the front, which is actually on Main Street in Middletown. And we've expanded into the yard, and now we're renovating that house to become our expanded tap house. So we've had a lot of that work started in earnest about a year ago in June, and we're planning to have it wrap up this summer. So lots and lots of work and planning to go into that. And I'll touch briefly about, how do we, with all of these financial needs and growing in a town that's growing, in an industry that's growing and really trying to support the other businesses on Main Street, where do we use these funds? We could have picked really anything, but let me just back up again on the rubric. That was our guiding light. I think, we looked at that over and over. Definitely the roadmap, you look at, it's basically, like Jordan said, a cheat sheet. So take a look at it and look at where your strengths are and focus those are easy wins, right? Because you can see if they have a high point total and you have a strength there, then it should be easy for you to speak about that. Those weaknesses, again, it's expected that you have weaknesses. So use this as an opportunity to build a plan for how you will address those. And so in the end, come out stronger. Again, if you think about where you're at, what you need to do, and then where you will go, that rubric can be focused on any one of those. So your strengths are telling you that you're already there and you're doing really well, but this investment will help you with those weaknesses and can bump that up. So for us, I know we focus a lot on our community impact. Volunteer was named because we are very active in nonprofit organizations in and around Middletown. So our customers participate in many different events that we organize so that we can get involved in the community. So, I mean, that's core to our mission, so much so that we put it in the name. So, and then also just being a presence on Main Street to become a place where people can come visit other small retail businesses in town was important. As a small business owner, the business plan was really important. It's the motivation to put a business plan together. You've got a million things to do, and that's one of them, but it's never top of the list. So Edge Grant was that motivation to say, we have to do this. And this is why there's a dollar number associated with it. And I think I probably am an offender of that 20-page max, because the first time around it wasn't in there. The second time it was, and I know I exceeded it. So the second time around I had to condense, and that's really important as well, to try to get to that elevator speech where you can list, what you do and why it's important and why you should be in consideration, and kind of get them to want to read more through the 20 pages, but that's important as well. And I'm going to jump to the third bullet here, but the research and market competition, I used, again, a lot of resources online. ESRI was one .com where I used to come up with a lot of the demographic information about Middletown and surrounding areas, and some of our local government organizations, but then also within the brewers industry, we have an association that provides some of this additional detail just to help us size the market and figure out, how big can we get, how big do we want to get, and what's our target. So we leveraged quite a bit of that. And I mentioned the money, how do we figure out what we want to spend or what we're planning to spend this money on? And so again, we had significant investment in our real estate and the property and the build out for that. But when you do that, then there's also an equipment investment. So that's required. So we were very specific about this money being used for equipment. And we were able to quantify, and it was easier to speak to that because we could say we're going to quantify our capacity from X to Y in this time period. This is the equipment that we need. This is what it's going to look like. So we worked with suppliers to get some detailed quotes, and that is much more tangible when it's in a proposal like this than something that may be more broad. And in the end, when we're reporting on this and we can give the feedback, it's so much easier to say, this is what you did for us, and this is the impact, versus maybe something that's a portion of an improvement overall. So again, not the end of the world if you're in the other situation, but I think if you have the opportunity to get into something that's more tangible and specific, then I think you would benefit from going that direction. So, and then the regional business manager team was helpful throughout. We worked with Dave first time, second time, and everything in between. So they're always there. This is what they do. They can take a look through and give you some feedback and give you some pointers and guidance. And so they're very helpful to us. So Jordan, I don't know if there's another slide or if there's questions at the end.
All right, so I think we're done with the actual formal presentation. Just wanted to remind everybody they can follow us on social media. You see our handles there. We do share very frequently, so it's a great way to see the latest and greatest of what's going on in our division. Always another way to contact us online through our website, delbiz.com. And of course, /edge is the page dedicated to the Edge grants. It can get you the contact form to help you get to the right person. The regional business managers for your areas are listed here, but you can also use that form to find it as well. And I believe, yes, we are on to the Q&A portion. So Kevin, thank you for joining us again. I think the insight has been really valuable. All right, Michael, we're ready for questions.
Great, and thank you so much to everybody who's been putting them into the Q&A. We've had some of our regional business managers taking care of answering questions in the Q&A, but we're just going to kind of start at the top, and I'll go through these. There are repeats, so I won't do, I won't double up. But Jordan, I'll fill them to you, and then if you want to send them to somebody else, that would be absolutely fine. Let's start here. Just a simple question. How many grants are we issuing this year or this round?
We are issuing 5 in the STEM category and 10 in the entrepreneur category, so 15 in total.
We hire people as contractors. How does that count in terms of the employee count?
Contractors do not count for the employees for the purposes of this program.
Okay. Have you given any grants to one-person businesses with almost no assets, or is that too small an endeavor for this program?
There is nothing too small for this program. So probably a great point to make here. We collect your financial statements, but we do not use that to evaluate your business, if that makes sense. Of course, we want to see you use the financial data and be really honest about where you're at and make sure that you understand where you're at, but we would not use that data against you.
Great. Are startup entrepreneur business owners who are still in the traditional workforce eligible to apply?
Yes. You would not be precluded just because you have a day job.
Okay, great. Maybe this helps you, go from your day job. What do startups do in terms of their balance sheet and income statements? Do they have a zero balance? Do they have no income statement? How does that work for them?
So you can be on 2 different sides of this coin. So if you're a startup, you're in one of 2 places. You're either at the very, very, very beginning, you have done nothing. And I say that as nicely as possible. You haven't done it quite yet. You haven't set up your business. It's more or less, I have an idea and I think I'm ready to move into this, and this is what I need to make it happen. If that is the case, you do not have actual financial statements, make sure you note that. Because if you just submit nothing and we're not super clear that that's where you're at, you run the risk of being rejected. If that's where you're at, that's okay. Focus on financial projections. So make sure that you're very, very clear about, okay, here's my idea. Here's where I'm at, which is the very beginning. If I were to get everything I'm asking for, here's where it's going to take me. Here's what it would mean in terms of revenue. Here's where I see that, available to reinvest back in my business, or, I use that data and follow it through and make sure that you're showing that, yes, you're at the beginning and you haven't quite moved forward just yet, but that you have put a lot of thought behind what happens when you do. If you're on the second side of that, where I just started my business, I've registered with, division of corporations, I've gotten a business license, that's kind of as far as I've gotten, that's okay too. You do have an income statement and a balance sheet at that point. They might be very basic and very minimal, but most likely you've invested some of your own personal funding into the business. That in itself we need to know what that is. And then if you just have incurred very basic startup expenses, the finances should show that as well. So again, just a tool for us to see where exactly you're at, not something to be used against you.
Okay, great. You talk about the maximum number of pages to submit. Is there a minimum number?
So I'm going to bring my other folks into the fold here, and you guys are probably tired of hearing me talking at this point. Laura, do you want to answer that one for me?
Sure. So 20 is max. And honestly, with all of the data that you need to provide, that should be pretty easy to hit. And you usually have to scale back from that. So I know it sounds like a very large number and you don't think that you'll get there, but once you start going through and actually building out the proposal, it'll come a lot faster than you think.
Great. Thank you, Laura. And Laura is our regional business manager for Kent County and also handling Sussex County for us at the moment. We've had this question multiple times in the Q&A, so I want to just quickly address it. How do I reach my regional business manager, or probably more importantly to start, who is my regional business manager? So it is based on where you're located. So it's Laura for Kent and Sussex. It is Dave Matthey for Newcastle County, not the Wilmington area. And it is Joe Zolkowski for the Wilmington area of Newcastle County. To reach them, you're going to go to delbiz.com/contact. And on that page, you'll be able to select the business manager you want your email to go to. That is by far the easiest way to get a hold of them. That email will go directly to them. So again, delbiz.com/contact. Next question, Jordan. What if you have not yet opened a physical business place, but are registered with a subsidiary physical location in a different country? So a little complicated there, but hopefully something you can address.
Yeah, that might be a little more complicated than we want to dive down to in this specific webinar, but I will just say, if you do not yet have a physical location in Delaware, if it does not stop you from applying, but please realize that if you were to win the grant, you would need to physically relocate to Delaware before anything would be dispersed to you.
Great. Do the forms count as part of the 20 pages?
I'm going to let one of the business managers jump in on that one too. Not all at once, Joe. You want to go?
I'm like, the application is the
application forms, I think was they're asking about. Doesn't it
applications count as part of the 20, I believe. Yeah.
Okay. Does the application have to be notarized?
So that is an area that we had talked about, with everything being what it is, there is a spot on there for it to be notarized, but I think the internal consensus was that we were going to allow that to slide this time around, just because it's not always possible for people to physically get to their notary.
Okay. Has the rubric changed at all from previous rounds?
No.
Well, from the first round, it did. We split it into 2 separate rubrics.
Yeah, I'm sorry. You're right. You are right, Joe. I was thinking more from just the most recent one.
All right. Is this available? We've got this a bunch of times in various forms. Is this only available to businesses that are less than 5 years, or if I'm over 5 years, is there something available to me? So we'll kind of address all of those at once.
At the moment, it's if you were within 5 years of last year's one, because we had to cancel last year's one. So technically within 6 years at the moment. We may look into other options for the EDGE program in the future, but that's this one right now.
Okay, thank you, Joe. So again, just kind of going through these one by one, and just want to address 2 items that have come up a bunch. Yes, we are recording this. We will put it on our website, delbiz.com/edge later today, and we'll also have it available on our social media pages, both on Facebook and Twitter later today as well. Also want to mention that we've gotten a lot of questions asking for the presentation, like the slides, and yeah, we can make a PDF available with the recording for that as well. Next question for you, Jordan. Are 501c3 senior centers eligible? Eligible.
So when we started the EDGE grant program, this was a brand new program, so we'd never done it before. We weren't really sure what we were going to get. And the question came up then, do we allow the nonprofits? And at that point, we weren't ready to say a hard no. But we were pretty positive that, that we're not looking to fund nonprofits that do not function exactly like a business. So if you're functioning like, I think they call it social entrepreneurship. So that was really where the nonprofit kind of qualifier was left. those that are operating in the more traditional 501c3 nonprofit space would not be eligible for the program.
One other thing we'd like to make sure we clarify, because we're getting some questions in here. If you've already received a grant, are you eligible again? And they're coming from people who, at least as far as I can tell, are not previous EDGE winners. So I'm guessing what you're asking about is if you received a DE relief grant. And Jordan, I'll let you address that.
Yeah, so the DE relief grants did not come from the Delaware Strategic Fund, so they would not fall under that category of previous funding, which would disqualify you. So if you are a DE relief grant recipient, you are still eligible for the EDGE grant program as long as you have not received a Delaware Strategic Fund grant.
Okay, great.
That leads, Michael, can I jump? This is Dave. Can I jump in?
Yeah, please, Dave, do. Yes.
So that for the, I think with regard to the relief grant and EDGE, they're two very, very different programs. And as Joe has said in other forums, this is real. This is not so much a grant as it is like a pitch competition, and the award is the money that you're going to get. So this is unlike relief grant in that you fill out the application, you qualify, and you get the money. This is very competitive. We're giving out few awards. We have a huge amount of interest, so there are going to be a large number of applicants. So just be mindful that this is not like the relief grant in that this is a pure competition. And something Jordan said earlier, you really want to focus on the business case. And so particularly with STEM applicants, their kind of default is I'll focus on the science. For our EDGE program, you really need to focus. To be successful, you need to focus on the business case and how this money is going to help you, amplify that business case. And then the last thing I would say before I'll let you get back to the questions is the deadline is April 30th. You don't get any points for submitting early. So we want to make sure that you have a complete application that you submit. So take your time and do it right. And unlike the relief grant, we don't have the luxury of a back and forth to correct technical issues with applications. Once you submit, that's it. We score what was submitted. So just please be mindful.
All of that really valuable points, David. And to reiterate your first point, a lot of times we do have people who apply and assume if they have put together a good application, then they're going to get the money. And that is just very much not the case. We've had 100, 150-ish, depending on the round, businesses apply each time. So as you mentioned, it is a very competitive process. So you want to make sure that you've got a really great application when you're putting it in. Jordan, moving back, because of COVID, my business was impacted. Should I submit 2019 income statement and balance sheet as well? No, we require the 2020. We need the most recent. So that goes back to, we're not going to use it to evaluate your business. So if your revenue took a massive hit from 2019 to 2020, that's okay. Use that to tell us where you're at. That's where you're at right now. You've been significantly impacted because of COVID. Your revenue has dropped. Maybe you need to pivot, whatever your business case looks like, but use your actual recent data. Great. For project budget, can you write estimates or do you need to have actual quotes?
Laura, do you want to take that one?
Sure. So it's best to have actual quotes. So that way you have a very exact number. However, I understand that if you're asking for an estimate to be done from a builder or contractor, they're not going to do those usually for free. So you can get a rough estimate and do that, but you need to be pretty spot on. You can't be off by like $10,000.
If you turned in an application last spring, so 2020, prior to the pandemic, do you need to reapply?
Yes. Sorry, Laura, do you want to expand on that? It needs a very strong yes.
I've taken 3 of these phone calls just today. Yes, please do, because again, you submitted something in February of 2020 before COVID happened. So I'm pretty sure that your business does not look the same as it did then. And that's completely acceptable. That's okay. That's what we're hoping. So we want you to use updated numbers. We want you to look at where you're at and do an honest assessment. As Jordan was saying, you may have taken a huge hit and your business may have changed altogether. So do not submit the same thing that you put in for in 2020.
Great. Let's see what is next here. Lots of questions about the PowerPoint. Startup. Sorry, just making sure that we've covered a lot of these. Just to reiterate, where can people get copies of the rubric itself?
That's also found when you download the application or you go online to our website. It is directly in the application. It's at the very bottom. You can see the rubrics for both STEM and entrepreneur there.
Great. With subscriptions, so they're talking about Zoom, web streaming software, Adobe products be considered as essential equipment for certain projects and applications.
That would be project dependent.
Okay. I have a business registered in Delaware and have a virtual office in Delaware. Can I still apply for this grant?
Can they expand on what a virtual office in Delaware looks like? That can mean a lot to different people. So I'm hesitant to answer that question.
So since you're hesitant and we've got a lot of questions to get to, I'm going to encourage the person who put in that question to contact your regional business manager. Again, you can do that via delbiz.com/contact and ask that question, and they will help you to get an appropriate answer for it. Is a sole proprietor LLC able to apply for the EDGE grant? I'm not sure if you're asking either one of those, but Jordan, if you could try and give a answer to that question.
I'm gonna let Joey answer that. He looks pretty eager to.
Yeah, you're either a sole proprietor or an LLC,
Yeah.
but either can apply. Yeah.
Okay. My business started in January of 2020. Do I qualify?
Yeah.
Okay, simple one there.
Startups count. Yeah.
Jordan, you mentioned this right at the beginning, but I do think it bears answering again. The non-STEM amount was reduced from $50,000 to $25,000. Can you explain why?
That was based on feedback that we got from surveying small businesses. So to be completely honest, I was a little surprised by that, but it was pretty clear from the data that people wanted the opportunity to compete for more awards. They wanted more chances, and they were willing to accept a lower grant amount in exchange for that. So that we used that feedback and changed it so that we now have 10 awards instead of 5.
And important to note that we had a certain amount of money for the program and just chose to split it up differently, again, based off of the feedback, as you mentioned. Again, we also, this one I want to quickly clarify, we mentioned there's a huge difference between EDGE grants and the DE relief grants. It says in previous emails, it stated that applying businesses had to be operating previous to March 2nd, 2020. That is for a DE relief grant. That does not apply to the EDGE grant program we're talking about today. Can businesses that are not yet open and operating, however, are in the build out and licensing process apply?
Yeah, I mean, all startups can apply, right?
Just remember, you have to have a compelling story to tell. So if you're at the beginning stages, if you can make a compelling argument for where you are, where you currently exist, and where your business is planning to go, then please make that case.
Can any portion of this grant be used towards salary?
Joe, you're on mute. Joe, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. Yeah, it's a prize. So you want to win. So your project has to be compelling. And if your project is just to pay you, you're probably not going to win.
Okay. And we are at 12:46. We have tons, and I've got 123 questions total in the Q&A, and I've got a bunch in the chat. We're going to keep going until 1 o'clock, Jordan, if that's okay.
Yep.
And then we'll make sure we've copied all of these questions, and we'll try and go through them after the fact and put some of this back up on the Edge website. So if you don't get an answer to your question right now, we'll encourage you to keep an eye out on social media for a post saying that that information has now been made available on delbiz.com/edge. Again, social media at Delaware Small Business on Facebook and at Delbiz, DELBIZ on Twitter. So moving back to the questions, I believe this was based off of something that Kevin from Volunteer said, but I believe we could probably just answer this. I believe he said Esri.com for information. Can somebody talk about places to get good information, good data for market size and that kind of stuff?
I'm going to let one of our business managers answer this since you guys are helping them pull them.
So the census is always a great place to start. And again, as Mr. Schatz noted, if there's an industry organization, reach out to them to get some stats. They will readily have them for you and would be happy to help you.
And the Delaware Library has a bunch of information you can get. So if you use the State of Delaware Library resources, they have a ton of stuff.
Can this be used for a major change of business focus? For example, if someone wanted to go from being a printer to opening a food service business or an accounting business, would this be considered a new business or would it be considered ineligible? I think they're asking if the overarching business entity has been around for more than 5 years, but is no longer doing the same thing that it was and has only been doing this new thing for shorter than 5 years. Can someone address that?
I think it probably depends. It probably depends on how sharp the pivot is. If you're going from printing signs to opening a restaurant, that's probably a completely separate venture. I mean, it's not really related so much. If you're just looking to add a new product line that would fall under kind of your original umbrella, that's a little bit different. So I think that could get so case specific that probably deserves further conversation one-on-one with your regional business manager.
Important question. You've addressed it in a couple of different ways, but I think it does bear re-answering. Is this only for Delaware businesses?
This is for Delaware businesses. So you must be majority physically located here in the state of Delaware. You may apply for the grant if that is not the case today, but if you were to win prior to any grant money being dispersed, that move must be complete and then you must be majority physically located in the state of Delaware.
I think this is a good question, maybe Jordan, to address in a little bit of a larger perspective for the industry. For real estate investment businesses, can the grant be used for renovation materials or equipment only? Can you also just kind of more broadly address real estate investment? Because I know it's come up a couple of times with businesses in that area and kind of what they can and can't do with the money.
So this money is actually coming from the Delaware Strategic Fund. And one of the very few restrictions there is that this cannot be used for speculative real estate. So it depends on how you would use it. So if it's more of, I need X, Y, and Z tools for my company, that's not speculative because that's for your company, that's specifically for your company. If you're asking us to give you, the money to develop the property located at 123 Main Street, that's speculative real estate. So I think I hate to keep going back to this, but it's really case by case. The real estate investment can be a little bit tough. I will say that is kind of a blanket thing. So you would really need to carefully evaluate what type of project you're undertaking.
Okay. Does our business, I think, Joe, you touched on this, but does our business have to be an LLC to be able
Right,
to?
yeah. It can be an S Corp, C Corp, sole proprietorship, any B Corp. What am I forgetting? I don't even know. But yeah, any type.
Okay. Is it a plus to have a website if you are a startup? I guess they're asking for purposes of getting the grant. Is it a plus?
No, that might be what you need the money for. So you would make your compelling case of why a website would make a huge difference for your business.
Okay.
Quick note though, if you were a Delaware Relief Grant recipient and we just gave you website money there, make sure we understand why you need more website money. I'm just being fair and putting that out there. We do have that information and we can access it. So please do not ask for a website twice and be upset when the answer is no.
And we will check.
Yes, there will be cross-referencing. Is that fair to say, Jordan?
Yes.
Okay. So the next question we have is, in reviewing the rubric, what is the difference between entrepreneur and STEM? And Jordan, when you answer this question, if you could address, I think I'll note that if people are looking to really get a sense of what the difference is between those two things, go to delbiz.com/edge and click on a link on that page that'll take you to a description of previous winners. I think that probably does a really good job of showing you the difference between a STEM company and an entrepreneur class company. But Jordan, if you could just address the separation a little bit, I think that would be helpful, because we have had people with great stuff apply in the wrong category and it really, not end up where they would have wanted it to.
Yeah, I think the most simple, plain Jane way, and I don't want to exclude anybody from this STEM by saying this, so please, again, carefully read the rubric and reach out if you're still unclear. Most of our STEM winners in the past are much more research oriented. So, obviously science, technology, engineering, math, that can cover a wide array of things. So maybe you own an engineering company and you have a new, brilliant, innovative way to do something and you need a piece of machinery to do it. You're probably going to be more competitive in the entrepreneur category as opposed to the STEM category. The STEM category, a lot of those companies are folks that are doing research and really have gotten to the place that they're ready to commercialize their product, and they need very specific things to do that. So you're getting really deep into the area of like intellectual property, trademarks, licensing, those kinds of things. So if that doesn't sound like a ballpark that you're familiar with, probably should be focusing on the entrepreneur.
Great.
George, do you want to, on those lines, do you want to talk about the, just flesh out a little bit, talking about the project itself, the budget and the match, and just being mindful of having to account for that?
Yeah, I definitely want someone to talk about match, because that's a scary thing.
Yeah, so this is not just that we would put our prize money in and then that's it. You have to have some skin in the game. So you got to think about how you would fund the extra piece of that. And it is a 3-to-1. So, for every $3 that we put in, we need you to put in $1 essentially. So there is something there. The most straightforward way to do it is just cash. So if you say, I need to build a website, we're going to contribute basically 75% of that. So we would need you to contribute that final piece. So don't make the assumption that, oh, well, I can get a website done for $25,000, bing, I'm done. If the entire website is $25,000 and that's the only component in your project, we are going to fund that up to so that we meet the 3-to-1 ratio. So you would still have to fund something into it, which means your grant award would not be for the full $25,000.
Okay. I'm going to skip around a little bit because we are short on time, and just knock out some that I think are more important. If your project total cost is, let's say, $50,000, do you qualify for 2 grants, or can you only be awarded 1 to pay for partial costs?
You can only be awarded 1.
That, of course, applies if you are in the entrepreneur class. If you are in the STEM class, then 50,000 actually is only half of where your limit is. Are you looking for brick and mortar businesses? My business is online, so I'm not sure how to demonstrate local ROI. And I think the other way around has been asked a couple of times. There's just a lot of questions about the difference between brick and mortar and online and how that might work.
I don't think, and I say this thinking about our past winners, a brick and mortar is not necessarily a requirement, but you need to think about long-term for your business. Like, do you ever intend to have a brick and mortar? Are you specifically only an online business? How does that look? I think it kind of goes into what you would need to discuss it in your proposal, like to really fully explain what your business is. So brick and mortar not required, but if you intend for all of eternity to only be an online business, that's great, but tell us what that means.
Okay. A lot of questions, Jordan, about business licenses. Do people need to have them to apply? Do they need it before they open their doors? What, just quickly addressing business licenses, because I know that it's something that's come up a lot.
Yeah, so if you are that which side of the post are you on, of the starting gate are you on? Kind of going back to that from earlier, if you have done anything for this business, as in you've incurred any kind of expenses to get this thing started, you are at least some stage of up and running, you have to have the business license even to apply. If you are on the front side of that, you say, well, I have a great idea, I haven't really formed the business yet, I am really truly pre-startup, then you don't have any business activity, so that wouldn't be required at that point. And we would hold that until the grant was ready for disbursement, but you would have to have one prior to grant disbursement.
Okay. Would Schedule C be sufficient for income statement and balance sheet, and or would it be considered supplementary?
So Schedule C is part from your tax returns, from your individual tax return, and it does not include a balance sheet. So that is an area where people have gotten themselves into trouble before. They submit that and believe that they have everything they need, and they don't. That's only half of the equation. So you can certainly supply that, but you had to get that financial data from somewhere in order to prepare it. I would go back to that source data and get your financial statements from that.
Okay. Great. Put in one more question here. And again, to reiterate, we're going to take all of these questions and kind of go through, because there are a bunch here we haven't had a chance to get to, both in the Q&A and the chat. We're going to go through them. We'll work through answers, and within the next couple of days, put answers with these questions, a document up on delbiz.com/edge. So if you do not follow the Division of Small Business yet on social media, Facebook and Twitter, please do that, because we will let you know that the information is up there when it is available. So let's say one last question here. Will it, I don't think I asked this, will it hurt a business that we haven't turned a profit yet?
No.
Multiple
As a new
answers,
business,
no.
rarely do until you're a few years in. So that's normal.
Okay, well, great. Jordan, Laura, Regina, Joe, David, Kevin, you're still there. Everybody, thank you so much for taking the time today. Hopefully that was helpful for the people who were able to be on today's webinar. Again, because it came up a lot, we have recorded the webinar. We're going to place that online, and then as well, we will make the presentation that Jordan went through available for people to download. So thanks again for joining us. And Jordan, if you wouldn't mind not canceling out the webinar for a moment to give me a chance to copy all these questions, that would be great.
Got it.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.
Right on.